Hello students, welcome back. This is Dr. Mercado speaking. I hope all of you are doing wonderful or having a fabulous week, staying positive. This is Accounting 2402, Principles of Managerial Accounting, and this week we are covering Chapter 20, which deals with cost, volume, profit analysis. Okay, it's very important. We are moving along in the semester. If you are struggling, please do not hesitate to contact me, to reach out to me for help. I am here to assist you in whatever I can. Okay, don't be shy. It is also very important to read the chapter before you begin working on any of your assignments. I know I sound like a broken record, but reading is critical. Okay, so this week, cost, volume, profit analysis. There's a variety of information presented in the chapter that revolves around variable and fixed costs. So variable costs are basically costs that vary in proportion to changes in the level of activity. So the cost is tied to the activity levels. We also have fixed costs, which basically remain the same in total dollar amount as the level of activity changes. So regardless if you produce more or less, or the activity level increases or decreases, they're fixed. That will not change. Mixed costs are comprised of both fixed and variable cost. Okay, so in this particular chapter, we also cover the contribution margin, which is basically the excess of the sales revenue over variable costs, and can be expressed as a ratio, which is the contribution margin ratio, or a dollar amount, a unit contribution margin. Okay. Another key point covered in this chapter is the break-even point. This is the point at which a business's revenues exactly equal costs. So you might hear all the time, well, what's my break-even? At that break-even point, you're not making any money. You're just covering your costs. So it's your revenues equal your cost. That is your break-even. Okay. The mathematical approach to cost, volume, profit analysis uses the unit contribution margin concept and mathematical equations to determine the break-even point and the volume necessary to achieve a target profit. Okay. Cost, volume, profit relationships can be used for analyzing the effects of sales mix on the break-even point and profits. Operating leverages can be used to analyze the effects of changes in sales on operating income. The margin of safety indicates how much sales must decrease before an operating loss occurs. So there's a lot of information in this particular chapter. Please make sure that you read it before you begin working on your weekly assignments. Okay, now I'm not going to cover too much the actual content of chapter 20. I am going to once again just focus on those problems that you're going to be having on your homework. That way I can streamline my efforts towards you having a better understanding of how to complete these problems. So the first exercise that I will be covering is exercise 27. This problem deals with the high-low method that is being covered. So it says, Sigler Incorporated has decided to use the high-low method to estimate the total cost and the fixed and variable cost components of the total cost. The data for various levels of production are as follows. And then they give us the units produced and the total cost. They're asking us to determine the variable cost per unit and the total fixed cost. And then based on the information obtained in Part A, we have to estimate the total cost for 115,000 units of production. And in this particular case, we are using the high-low method. Okay. So in the high-low method, we have to identify the area or the the activity that produces the highest level and the lowest level. Okay, and then using that information we can form our calculations. Okay, let me just find the problem real quick. I had it right here and I don't know where I left it. One moment. Okay, here we go. Okay, so we're going to be using the high-low method. Let's see how we can apply this to the problem. Okay, so let me get a piece of paper. Here we go. Okay, so the first thing that they're asking us to do is to determine the variable cost per unit. Okay, to determine the variable cost per unit, we're going to get the difference in total cost over the difference in units produced. So, because we are using the high-low method, we're going to select the highest and the lowest number. So the first thing is to identify which ones are my high and which ones are my low. Well, according to the cost, the highest one is the 32,120,000. So this is going to be my high, the 32,120,000. Okay. Now we need to find the lowest, okay? And the lowest is the 25,100,000. So those are my high and my low. Okay? So those are the two amounts that I'm going to be using. The highest amount, 32,120,000, with units produced of 120,000. My low is 25,100,000 with units produced of 80,000. So I've identified my high and my low. Now I'm going to get my difference in total cost. Well, my difference in total cost is the 32,120,000, okay, minus my low, which is 25,100,000, okay, and I'm going to divide that by my difference in units produced, and that's 120,000 units, minus 80,000 units. So I got my high cost, my low cost, my high units, and my low units, okay? And then we can run our calculation. So let's see what that gives us. 32,120,000 minus 25,100,000. That gives me 7,020,000. Okay. Okay. So what I did is I subtracted the 32,120,000 minus my 25,100,000. That gave me 7,020,000. And then I'm going to get my units of 120 minus 80,000. That gives me 40,000 units. Okay. Okay. Now I can calculate my variable cost. Okay. So I've got $7,020,000, and I'm going to divide that by 40,000 units. So my variable cost per unit is $175.50. So using the high-low method, my variable cost per unit is going to be $175.50. And we utilize the highest number and the lowest number to get our variable cost calculation. Now, requirement 1 asks us to determine the variable cost, which we did, $175.50, and also the fixed cost. Okay, so we have to calculate for the fixed cost. I'm going to do it for both the high and the low just to show you that the fixed cost will not change. Okay, so in order to be able to calculate your fixed cost, we've got a formula that we utilize to calculate our total cost. So my total cost is equal my variable cost per unit times your units produced plus your fixed cost. Now we don't have all of these components to be able to solve. Okay, so that's why we're going to do some adjustments, I would say. Okay, so for the highest level, we're going to start off with the total cost. Okay, so for my total cost for my high, that was 32,120,000. 32,120,000. Okay, and then that is equal to my variable cost, which your variable cost we just calculated of $175.50. And then my units, for my high number, I've got 120,000 units. Okay, plus fixed cost, which is what we're trying to solve for. Okay, so then that's going to give me 32,120,000. Okay, now let's get the calculator out. It's 175.50 times 120,000. That gives me 21,060,000. Okay, plus my fixed costs. Okay. So now what I'm going to do here is I'm going to isolate my fixed cost. I want to leave it by itself. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get my 32,120,000 minus, I'm going to move the 21,060,000 from the right to the left hand side. So I'm going to subtract. Okay. So all I did is I got my 32,120,000 minus, I moved the 21,060,000 from the right to the left. So I'm going to subtract that. So let's see what that gives us. 32,120,000, 1, 2, 3, minus 21,060,000, 1, 2, 3. That gives me $11,060,000. That is equal to your fixed costs. Okay. So this is how we solved for it. We got the total cost of 32,120,000. We got our variable cost per unit, which we had calculated at 175.50, times your units produced of 120,000, plus your fixed cost. And we're solving for the fixed cost component. So once we did that, we got the 32,120,000 equals to 21,060,000 plus my fixed cost. The third step is I moved over my 21,060,000 from the right to the left hand side to isolate my fixed cost or solve for my fixed cost, and that gave me $11,060,000. Okay, so that is my fixed cost. I'm going to repeat the same thing, but now for the lowest level. That way we can see if we did it right. Fixed costs should not change at whatever level. Those are fixed. They're going to remain the same regardless the actual production or activity levels. Okay. So for the low level, I've got 25,100,000. Okay. So I'm picking up my low cost, 25,100,000. Okay. My variable cost per unit stayed at 175.50. That's what we calculated. My activity is 80,000 units. Okay. Plus fixed cost. Okay. So 25,100,000. Going to be equal to, let me get my calculator out. So that's at 175.50 times 80,000. That gives me 14,040,000. Okay. So that's 14,040,000 plus fixed cost. Okay. Now I'm going to get my 25,100,000 minus your 14,040,000. And then that's going to equal your fixed costs. So what's 25,100,000 minus 14,040,000? That's 11,060,000. That is equal to your fixed cost. And if you can see here, regardless if you use the high level or the low level, your fixed costs, which are going to remain constant regardless of the activity level, will be 11,060,000. So requirement 1, determine the variable cost. It's 175.50 per unit. Total fixed cost, your fixed cost is $11,060,000. Now, letter B says, based on part A, estimate the total cost for 115,000 units of production. Okay, so now we have to estimate the cost if we're going to produce 115,000 units of production. Okay, so this is what we're going to have. The total cost for 115,000 units. First, we're going to start off with our units. How many units are we producing? Well, we're producing 115,000 units. I'm going to multiply that by my variable cost per unit, and my variable cost per unit is 175.50. Okay, so I'm going to multiply with 175.50. And then that's going to give me 115, 1, 2, 3 times 175.50. That's going to give me a total variable cost of 20,182,500. Okay. Then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add. Okay. Let me put this over here so I can delete this. And then I am going to add my fixed cost. Okay, so my fixed cost is 11,060,000. Okay, so now I can get my total cost for those 115,000 units. So it'll be 20,182,500 plus 11,060. So my total is 31,242,500. Okay. 31,242,500. So requirement B, based on an estimate of the total cost for 115 units of production. So if I were to produce 115,000 units, this is what my total cost would be for those 115,000 units. We're looking at variable cost of 20,182,500, fixed cost of 11,060,000 for a total cost of 31,242,500. So this is step by step, and this is using the high-low method. You select the high cost, low cost, and its corresponding units produced to calculate your variable cost per unit, and then you solve for your fixed cost. And then once you have that information, you can just plug in any units produced to be able to calculate your total cost. Okay, so that is it for exercise 27. Please make sure that if you have any questions, you let me know. And please make sure that you plan accordingly to ensure you meet your assignment deadlines. I have several students that have not been participating in completing their assignments. It is critical that you complete your weekly assignments because these assignments serve as a tool to help prepare you for your exams and to be able to understand the content, okay? The only way you're going to learn accounting, or this type of an accounting, for example, is to actually do it. Okay, this is not something that I can lecture you on for hours and it's going to sink in. No, this is going to sink in when you do it 10, 20, 30 times, okay? So the more you practice, the better, okay? So that is basically it. Have a wonderful rest of your week, and until next time, thank you.